All right, we have our panelists here to, of course, also weigh in on that and a raft of other stories as well that we shall be discussing much later in the course of the program as we run also the stories for you. Allow me to introduce to you Ambassador Erastus Omoncha, who's the former Deputy Chair of the African Union. Also, we do have with us Professor Noah Midamba, who's the Vice Chancellor of KCA University, an expert on defense and foreign policy. Also, we have with us Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, who is an expert on conflict resolution and national security. Also, we do have with us Peter Biara Ajak, who's the chairman of South Sudan Young Leaders Forum, and we do have with us as well the security analyst and chair of African Center for Strategic and Security Studies, that is Dr. Captain Wirunga Simiyu. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Right, you've heard, of course, from the committee on the racial slurs, and of course from Nielsen as well this morning, and the development also from the doctor that yes, the cognitive state of Donald Trump is up to scratch. So what do you have to make of that particular statement that we had about shithole? This was happening last week, and of course has drawn a lot of flack from everywhere as far as immigrants are concerned. Let's begin with you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Debarl. Trump's comment is, I don't know whether we should really put so much value on it, because the only aspect one should worry about is the fact that he continues to have followers who voted for him, and somebody could have drafted that statement, yes. And you can hear that even in the room, there was a lot of impassioned, fire and fury in the House. But let's look at the statement itself and comment on a few aspects of it. When Trump started to campaign, I mean, the history is very clear. Who he was in the business, and therefore there is nothing that has changed as far as the person is concerned. Then, of course, look at what he has been able to do in the last 1 year that he has been in office. First of all, you can see that his foreign policy is in tatters. In Europe, he campaigned on the side of Brexit, and so Europe is really very uncomfortable situation with him. He even had to cancel his visit to London because of, the fear that there would be very serious demonstrations in London. And yet that was always seen as the capital that is closest to the US. Then when you move away from Europe, look at what is happening in the Middle East. It's totally messed up. In fact, America is becoming irrelevant in the Middle East. Now look at what is done in Africa. In fact, the case of Africa is even worse, because ever since he took office, he hasn't even appointed somebody in charge of African affairs in foreign policy, meaning that to him, Africa is a basket case.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the sentence, I mean, what he said in context, it's a wake-up call to us as Africans. A wake-up call in the sense that what many people say in the closets, he has said it in the open. And I think it should give us some food for thought as to how our relationship should be. Some have called that we should save a relationship with the US right away. But I don't think that is how we should go, because relationship with America is not just with the person, it is with the people. And I think, looking at it symbolically, it might make a lot of sense for us to protest, but I think in the long run, it will be good for us to continue to engage, because you can see the Senate has taken action. They are already calling into question what he said and what he meant, which means really we cannot take his statement as meaning the US. And therefore, the reaction that has come, whether it is from the AU, whether it is from the UN, I think is measured and good in that sense. I think moving forward, Trump has always been against migration. When he campaigned, he even talked of going to build a wall on the southern part of the US.
Yes.
And they called you know, the Mexicans, all sorts of names, rapists and all sorts of names. Now he's calling Africans whatever he's calling them. To me, it's pointing to one thing. U.S. has reached its plateau. It's now on the decline. Mm-hmm. It's losing its space in the global economy. And as we see the U.S. declining, it's now giving space to others to emerge. And you will see other countries, of course, occupy that space. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is the beginning of what we see empires from history, how they decline. The U.S., it will take a very strong president in the U.S. that will be passionate, help bring back America's reputation and space in the world table.
All right. Let's hear from, first of all, Trump had said that, you know, he's cancelling his trip to London because he thinks that particular embassy that Barack Obama had, you know, commissioned was not really worth the money that it had been, you know, put up with. So that was the reason. Do you think the demonstration was the sole reason? He had fears and bugbears?
Well, I think that is a cover-up because if you look at the embassy itself, when the construction started, it didn't even start during the time of Obama administration. Mm-hmm. It started way back. And in fact, the taxpayers, the history proves that the taxpayers really did not have to really dig into the pocket for it because they sold the old embassy, which was becoming a nightmare to protect where it was in London. And all they moved it. It's like moving from Tom Mboya to Biashara Street. I mean, for him, then it's like saying you moved to some other place. It isn't a place that he moved too far from where it was, but in this prime area, of course, what it has also done, it has elevated the place and lifted up because of the property prices that have gone up. But this is also part of that inherent in him of ratio, because he had to blame somebody. Right, and the easiest person to blame was Obama. All
right, let's say from Professor Noah Midamba, you are also a U.S. citizen, right? Were you, do you take special umbrage also on these particular comments that were tripping off the tongue?
Debarl, I agree with some of the points that Ambassador Rastas raised. But Debarl, let me take my reaction in this way. First of all, I'm not surprised. This is the same man that said that Nigerians that come to Americans are refusing to go back to their huts, and among many other things that he has said hopelessly during the time. But I want people to remember that America is still the only superpower in the world, the strongest economically and strongest military. What does that mean to all of us, those that are living here in the continent of Africa? Second point is, and this is the point that Ambassador raised, I wonder how many leaders around the world are thinking quietly about Africa in the same manner, but they're not able to come in front of the camera and talk loudly, the way Trump said. Debarl was in Nanjing City, China in 2005, when a crowd of people wanted to touch me to see if I have tail. And therefore, I cannot forget. I cannot forget that kind of experience. The Middle Eastern countries are mistreating Africans, workers, in a manner that's so demeaning, and they continue doing that in the face of the relationship we have.
This is in 2005.
This continue.
No, this is in 2005, and they want to touch you to find out if you have
that's
a tail?
Yeah, if I have a tail. And so
what was your reaction?
My reaction is, come and touch it, you know. I'm wide open so that you can, so you can figure out who I am. Now, 2005, 2018, what has changed? The slave trade in Libya is an indication of what people think about Africa that is still going on. Thirdly, unless this is teachable moment for all of us, unless Africans think carefully and soul search and demonstrate otherwise, that we are going to take control of ourselves, we are going to manage our election, we are going to manage our governance of our countries, that we are going to produce, that we are going to be self-sustaining as the other countries have done, no one will respect us.
Thank you.
And now, the last point. The last point is that Kenya need to be very careful in terms of pronouncement, because it is easy to jump into hooray and call Trump all kind of name. But officially, this man is volatile and has a thin skin and can react very badly toward the country.
All right, but
so we need to be very careful.
It flies in the face of what the doctor has said, the physician, that we've just heard from him, that, yeah, he's in a very good cognitive state, so there is no real need of people to worry about it. And of course, what he does need is maybe some exercise just to, boost up his flow of blood.
That doctor that examined Trump, I think we must examine him. He must be examined so that we check that doctor that examined Trump, whether he's in a good state of mind. I'm not surprised personally.
So him coming from State House, because he's a White House physician, of course he cannot give any bird or anything that really flies in the face of what people expect.
Look at Trump's advisors. I mean, first of all, I'm not surprised that Trump is saying those words and using that kind of language. I am surprised that his advisors do not know much about a country. Trump is a person who apparently suffers from personality disorder. Trump is a person whose mind has always been in the gutters. This is a man who says that, and brags in the locker rooms, that he used to grab the crotches of women. And you know, some Americans, 50 million plus, went ahead and elected a sex offender to White House. Trump's mind has been in the gutters, so him coming up with this kind of shithole business and all that is normal for him. And what I'm surprised, however, Debarl, is that he has advisors who appears to be not so knowledgeable, and you may say that they are in a knowledge gutter or a shithole. If you do not understand that Norway is a predominantly white country, what kind of an advisor is that to Trump? And this tells you that the kind of people Trump is surrounding himself with in the knowledge gutter and cannot do much. And I want to echo what Ambassador Mwencha is saying, that we shouldn't bother much. This is an individual. Countries have relationship with countries, not individuals. An individual president might personify that or drive that agenda. But in the case of America, which will be undoubtedly on a path of decline as China and other countries come and fill that spot, it's up to them to decide whether they want to take the moral high ground or go low.
Thank you. Let's hear from Wirunga. We'll come to you, Peter Yarajak.
No, we can say Trump is an individual, but you can also see how he's propagating his foreign policy. What is shocking me is that Trump seems to have actually grabbed America. And instead of us looking at America that has used institutions for a very long time to propagate their foreign policy, now it's actually being perpetuated by Trump's ideas of what a foreign policy is. And what shocks most people is that even those that are around him and who are supposed to use institutions to propagate American policy towards Africa and the rest of the world are actually doing what Trump wants them to do. And that, to me, I think we should move away from this idea of saying each country has its own way of doing things, and therefore, even if Trump is there, America will still remain America. I don't think so. This is a very strange moment for the American system of governance, And we must agree and understand that for as long as this man is in charge, he has people we've never seen in America who behave the way they behave. Because Trump has a group around him that any normal human being will not understand their thinking. We're just watching the secretary in charge of Homeland Security saying she is not aware that Norway is a predominantly white country, and that is the secretary in charge of Homeland Security. So I don't think we should be saying that America's institutions, of course they have their own projections, world interests, regional interests, but I think we must understand that America is changing. And for as long as Trump is in charge, we must look at Trump's nose to understand where America is moving. Because he seems to have put everything under his wraps, and whatever he wants, it happens. And there's nothing Trump has suggested America should do that has not been done. Tell me any, or any cabinet secretary that has gone against Trump. None. So therefore, we must be very careful that yes, we have historical perspectives about how countries manage themselves, but we also have very queer times in a nation's history where things can easily look very strange. And that's what is happening with America. Right. And I think it's better we understand that so that we know how we need to deal with the U.S.
Right.
As long as Trump is in charge.
Right. Dr. Biara Ajak.
Well, exactly. I think that is the point that I was going to say. We just watched the Secretary of Homeland Security basically lying. And it's not just her. There was also 2 senators that wrote a joint statement saying that they did not hear Trump use the word shithole. And then later on, they said what they heard was something like shit house. Yes. But the point that he's making is this. America has gone beyond reality or truth. Facts no longer have meaning. And I think this is very dangerous. I think people are not seeing this, but within the Republican Party, I can tell you there is nobody that is going to stand up against Trump. Nobody. Look from the leadership. What word did they use to describe what Trump has done? Unfortunate, regrettable. And if you listen to what Lindsey Graham was saying, there were a lot of racial slurs. By the way, this shithole was a specific reference to Africa. There is now a much more lengthy article on Washington Post that gives you the details and the context in which this word was used. And it went on. First of all, nobody objected except Lindsey Graham was the only person in the room that raised objection. And then afterwards, what happened? You find out that members of the Senate, lying to the public to cover up for a president that is basically saying racial slurs. What is happening, my brother, is part of the effects of globalization. When it was happening initially in the 1990s, it was good for us. You know, there were a lot of resources coming out. It was even good for the Americans. They were booming. But you see, since then, real wages in America have been stagnant. If you look, for example, now, people in my generation in America, they're making less, way less than both their parents and probably less than half of what their great parents were making. So what has happened is globalization, for many Americans, especially the one in the middle class and bottom, have been very bad. It's basically factories closing. If you go to, for example, to England, and you go, like, for example, to places like Sheffield, that used to be the bedrock of industrialization, there's no single industry alive. Basically, communities are living on government grants that are sent to these community areas. Largely, it used to be EU grants for the UK, for example. In America, it's even worse. So basically, they're seeing globalization as something that is negative for them. Their jobs are being taken. And this is basically what Trump is using. The second thing is what we said last week. Among the children being born in America, majority are non-white. Now, basically by year 2056, white people will be a minority. And the white people has felt that they own America, right? They went there as immigrants, like everybody else, right? America was for Indians. Now Indians do not even make 1% of the population.
The Red Indians.
Yeah, the Red Indians. But basically the white people now think America is their home. And they're feeling that they need to protect it against others, especially non-white people. The reason why Trump is suggesting Norway is this idea that they should be, and he said it, by the way, during the campaign, we should have immigrants coming from countries that share our cultures. than countries that are foreign. Like you have Muslim coming, you have African coming, and all of this thing. So this is the context. So this is a very deep problem. And if you look, actually, this is working for him. This scandal is actually improving Trump and has basically put the Republicans in line. The same with the book, Fire and Fury. What has Fire and Fury done after all? It's basically united the Republicans behind Trump. It got rid of Bannon, which the Republican leadership did not like. So it created this wedge between Bannon and Trump. So Bannon is out. Now all the Republican leaders, they felt that Bannon was their problem. And now they are behind Trump. Finally, the context in which that meeting took place, it was a deal that has been happening for weeks, right? Senators and House leaders have been negotiating on an immigration deal. And they have made substantial progress. And even Trump said that he was going to sign what they agreed. At the last minute, Trump is far right. These people like Cotton, Purdue, these are basically far right white nationalists that then came and tell Trump, no, this is bad for you, it's not good for your base. And it's basically Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is my age. He's the guy who is basically behind all of this. So now Trump ambushed these guys that have been working for weeks with these guys, and the meeting turned out into a shouting match with racial slurs being used, many, many bad things being said. So what is this telling you is you have a president that cannot honor anything that he agrees to and can change his mind at the last minute. This is very dangerous, especially in the context of foreign policy. Let me tell you, Debarl, American president has so much powers. In fact, the framers of American Constitution did not imagine the current situation. They never imagined there will be a case where a president is crazy. And if you look, drones program, President of America can basically kill anybody he wants in the world without anybody asking him, whether Congress or anybody. So in terms of foreign policy, it's all up to Trump and what Trump feels. Now he's not even appointing ambassadors. There are no ambassadors in many countries. He's saying, in the end, I'm the only one that matters.
Right.
So this is a big problem.
It's a big problem. We need to take a short break right now. Okay. America first. And Erastus, also, it was on your time to say something before you took a short break on that particular topic.
Thank you very much, Debarl. I think what Mustafa said about the medical condition is not something that we should start really to focus on a lot, because, first of all, it was done by a White House doctor. And, but if you look at medical opinion that has been given around, and some psychologists who have commented, they do point to some kind of behavior which worries them. I mean, you saw the other day when he was arguing with the North Korea leader saying, well, my button is bigger than yours and all that. I mean, this is, even this language, I mean, the language we're talking about now, to me, when you look at the statement that came out, it must have been drafted by somebody. He was reading it off the teleprompter. And so for him to deny they never heard of it because it's there in text and on teleprompter, it's really neither here nor there. It is a matter of trying to cover up because it's very embarrassing. And in this moment, nobody would want to come out and say, well, his behavior is not that, good to be able to be handling things like that nuclear pattern. But I wanted to pursue the point that Peter raised, and this is to me very important when he talked about globalization and what we see the America's stance. It's a fact that what is now generating all this is related to the global economy. And the America pushed itself that globalization was good, only to discover that it was hurting them, because jobs were migrating from the US, and this is one of the areas that he campaigned on very strongly. And because jobs were migrating, America losing some of the operations, unemployment was rising, and so he used the passions of some of the areas where people were left jobless to whip up emotions and get elected. But what are the lessons we learn from here? Globalization is here to stay, and we cannot run away from it. But as we get more and more into it, we have to then take care of the consequences of it. The consequences of it is going to be, and you can now see the world is also moving into artificial intelligence. In other words, we are getting into an area and demographic changes that are taking place in Europe because of the fear. Artificial intelligence is being, given a lot of support in research and development so that we can have these factories that produce literally using machines. At the moment, you see, China is the global factory that is producing most of the goods. And many of the countries moved to the service industry and the rest, which is also declining. Mm-hmm. So we are entering a very dangerous territory of high unemployment. And because of that, the reaction that we start to see is protectionism, like America.
Thank you.
That is why American first and the rest.
All right. Very briefly, we went up on it. We move to other stories as well. Let's hear from Professor Noah Midamba.
The most important thing for us in Africa is to take care of our houses. We cannot criticize America. We cannot continue blaming others for our own ills. When we know very well, we can take care of ourselves. The most unfortunate thing that's going on in South Sudan, Congo, with the potential to feed the rest of Africa, has not been able to move any further. Uganda is the most fertile land. Kenya has highly educated people. South Africa was left, when white regime left, at a very high level, and is going down. So the question, we need to look inside us. And instead of looking at China emerging, China is emerging because it's studying and understanding all the African weaknesses and taking so much out of Africa. And therefore, that is my focus. Mm-hmm. And that's what Africans need to do.
Thank you. Dr. Mustafa, briefly.
Yeah, Debarl, just dovetailing into that discussion, let us, as Africans and in Africa, use these unfortunate remarks from the US president to our advantage. Let us look at the areas that we need to improve. And indeed, there are many places, there are many areas, sectors that we have to improve. There are many countries in Africa, South Sudan, Nigeria, even Kenya, Burundi, Somalia, that we have to really think about where we want these countries to be. The countries themselves have to think about themselves where they want to be in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, and improve. Let them not take this as an insult, but from a president who is wayward. And let us put our houses in order. The second point I want to make here is that empires come and go. Pax Romana was there. Britannica was there when Britain, the Great Britain, was colonizing, controlling the entire world, literally. United Kingdom is now a small country, controlling a small country. Scotland wants to actually just get off. Today is American time. It's the most powerful country in the world. That power will go one day. It's not permanent. Mm-hmm. And so they need to be good to the other members of the world that are the citizens of the world, so that when they are down, and perhaps one day Africa is going to be up, mm-hmm. we will mind about the United States of America. We will mind about Europe. And these countries also need to understand that they have contributed to some of the unfortunate situations that African countries are in. Some of the leaders were killed by Westerners, from Patrice Lumumba in the DR Congo.
Thank you.
The colonization and all the ills, slavery, colonization, the arbitrary borders that we find ourselves in that are causing conflicts, violent conflicts, were really put by whites, without using or belaboring that point.
Right. Thank you. Before we come to you, Peter Ajak, also the Freedom House has released a report just yesterday, and this is it's called the Freedom 2018 Democracy in Crisis. You will just show that a bit on our screen as well. The report which is here, Democracy in Crisis. This is from the Freedom House, and there you go. Democracy and human rights. And if you allow me just to flip through to where they're saying that also in the United States, there is a democracy in crisis, political rights and civil liberties around the world deteriorated to the lowest point in more than a decade in 2017, it says, extending a period characterized by emboldened autocrats, beleaguered democracies, and the United States' withdrawal from its leadership role in the global struggle for human freedom. And we're discussing about America, and when we come to United States, it says the United States in decline. Freedom House has tracked a slow decline in political rights and civil liberties in the United States for the past 7 years. Prominent concerns have included the influence of money in politics, legislative dysfunction, and severe inequalities in the criminal justice system. In 2017, however, the deterioration accelerated. The United States lost 3 points on the 100-point scale used by Freedom in the World due to growing evidence of Russian interference in the 2016 elections. And it goes on and on and on. We had Professor Noah Midamba raising the point that, yes, we still have the United States as a global superpower, but that is in question right now as far as, the metrics of democracies, the metrics of what is happening economically as well, with the invasion of China taking a swath, especially in the African continent as well. This is a big threat to United States. Very briefly on that as we wind up.
No, I agree entirely that U.S. In relation to other countries is in decline. If you look at share of global economy, every year is declining. Its voting share within the World Bank, IMF, every year is declining. And that's because others are also growing and rising. And it's because of that many Americans now feel threatened. And this is basically what allowed Donald Trump to use that fear. It's the same fear that you find in Europe. If you travel in places like France or the UK, they're always looking to the past, because they used to dominate the world. And they are not confident in looking to the future. This is worryingly the problem and the image that America is now portraying. America is no longer confident about the future. It's basically looking into the past, and that is problematic. Donald Trump is criticizing media 24 hours a day. And this is making it incredibly dangerous for journalists that are working in authoritarian countries. Because if Donald Trump is calling journalists names, this is basically amazing for all the dictators in the world. And they're using these words to basically suppress their own countries. So if you look even like the recent protests in Iran, although there was a heavy government hand in cracking down, it made it very difficult for anybody to take America seriously in complaining about a crackdown when you have Donald Trump's supporters who are these white nationalists killing protesters in America. So basically, there's no longer now a power with moral legitimacy. America is losing its soft power. So this is a real challenge. But I like to build on the point that Professor Noah Midamba raised. And this is the reality that although Donald Trump, of course, his instincts are racist, they are basically very nativist, there is a point that he's making. Look, everywhere in the world, take my country, for example, South Sudan. Now, we have more than 1 million refugees in Uganda alone. We have nearly 400,000 in Kenya here. We have, I don't know, several 100,000 in Ethiopia. Basically, you have 2 million refugees outside, 2 million displaced internally. You have more than half of the population, something like 70%, depending on food aid, right? So basically, if you look at the reality of what is going on in South Sudan, inflation is basically the highest in the world. So if you look at what is happening in South Sudan, people are fleeing the country because the leaders has made it difficult for the citizen to live there. And this is the image we as an African has to begin changing if we are going to be respected by other people.
Thank you. Right, we shall come to South Sudan much later, but let's hear from Wirunga very briefly as we're winding up on the United States as well.
Yes.
Democracy in crisis. Is it slipping? Do you think it's a superpower that it has been?
You know, I want to speak on two fronts. One about the shithole. Apart from the name being used.
I thought we did exhaust the shithole.
No.
Let's pick up on the shithole just,
yes.
Yeah, then we wind up on it.
Apart from him using the word, which is not very nice, what is it that is not correct about us that he thinks we are doing? Everything he talks about is Africa. You know? The other day I was watching news and Africa actually pays tax equal to $533 billion per year. Africa. That is a combination of so many countries, and this money you don't see where it goes. West Africa, they don't have central banks because all of them are in France. You know, I mean, we must accept that some things we are being told is true. It's just that the way it's being told is what we don't like. You know? And it's good using those words. Clever Africans should now be thinking, truly, what he's saying is true. What do we need to do? So I'm just being a devil's advocate, but that is the truth. We can start with East Africa. People are removing limits of age. People are terms of limitation of terms of power. You know, all these things are African in nature. And look at Haiti. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but we have Barbados being ruled by blacks. We have Bahamas being ruled by blacks. So, I mean, we must accept that there's something terribly wrong with what Trump is telling us using the wrong word, but he's telling us the truth. So, secondly, on the issue of America losing it, it is a long story, but I don't want to go there.
Yeah, very briefly.
And what I know is the world power is projected through three means: military, economic, and soft power. I don't see how somebody is going to dislodge America as a leading power in the world for the next 50 years.
For the next 50 years. But on the soft skills that you're talking about,
when you look at the economy of China, they will not lose it. China has no soft power in the world. Nothing. But if you look at what America does, anywhere you go, you'll get USAID. You go, you'll get an American institution, movie. You know, that is soft power. You know, you wake up in the morning and you're thinking this is an American movie. That is soft power. They are into education system. China is using Confucius institution. They've started putting them all over the world. So that is one area that I think we need to be very careful when we say about a power losing its space in the world. Right. In the economy, Debarl, I agree, China is coming up. But look at the GDP of China. Even with its economy, it is 97. 97 in the world. So the country can have resources, but the population is not rich.
Thank you.
Now, that is the difference between the US and China. You get the point?
Yeah.
So I don't think we are anywhere near to say America is going to lose it just because we've had empires in the world before. The dynamics are not the same.
Right. Thank you. I think we've belabored the point on America. We need to move on now.